Good evening. Welcome to our Friday night Bible study. I already had 20 to 25 minutes of this recorded when the lights went out. And if I had known how quickly they were going to come back on, I probably would have just kept on recording. But I didn't know how long it was going to be. So I went ahead and quit recording and shut things down. And no sooner did I get that done and go talk to my wife, she got woke up by the UPS beeping in the other room when the lights went out. And so she has joined us now. She was asleep before.
Maybe I should go back to sleep. I interrupt you a lot.
Well, the point is that there are thunderstorms in our area. I've heard lightning. I was mentioning that before. Uh, this week was my week to do the lawn, and it went relatively quickly because there wasn't a whole lot to cut. Didn't have, in fact, I didn't even replace string in the string trimmer because I didn't do that much cutting with it. It just wasn't that much that needed to be cut. I could go by pretty quickly, and I didn't use up a lot of string with it. However, if it rains now, I mean, this is still August, and I often go into September or even October. In fact, I think one year I even did one mowing in November. Uh, yeah, if it rains, it might be refeed our lawn. Of course, that would make it green again, make it look a little nicer, but it would also then, of course, require more mowing. But such is life. I was thinking that I was pretty busy this week. I did prepare a sermon presentation. I will need to proofread that. We will probably go ahead and record that just like we've been pre-recording our Friday night Bible studies for the simple reason that 4 weeks ago when we last did one, our internet connection went out just as we were starting. We didn't get anything up for quite a while. So
For the simple reason that, according to our connectivity, we live in the Stone Ages.
well, that does seem that way. I still think they need to do something at that pole that our service comes from because,
Well, also, the power.
well, yeah, the lightning flashes and the power goes out because around here it's not that reliable. Which means I'm going to have to go through and reset all the clocks after we're done with this. Anyway, consider that as an unofficial announcement that we are planning a sermon presentation and we should get it recorded and get it uploaded and have it scheduled to appear at about 11 Central Time tomorrow on the 17th. So, another thing that happened today, it was Microsoft's week to update thing, so all my computers needed updating and restarting. And while I was doing that, I noticed that I had some email, so I opened the email and I had a Bible question waiting. I had not checked my email soon enough. Last time they sent me a Bible question, to get the Bible question answered, they'd already withdrawn it and assigned it to somebody else by the time I saw that it was there. So, but I went ahead and partly based on the topic, and in order to get it done before I did this, I went ahead and answered that question. I've sent the answer through. So here it is. The question comes from someone who calls themselves disciple-her, making me assume this is a female and asking the question. And here's what this person wrote. Hi. I've been hearing a lot about how everything has a frequency. People, things in nature, even clothing, etc. I know there was a study done on how certain sound frequencies can cause repair within the body. in Revelation 21, where John lists the 12 foundation stones of the New Jerusalem, could part of God's reason to use those stones be in frequencies they emit? I read your article. When she says your article, she's not talking about my article. She's talking about an article on the site about the use of crystals by people in the occult. If God banned the Israelites from wearing amulets as magic stones, why did he command the ephod of the high priest be filled with the same stones mentioned in the New Jerusalem? I'm a Christian and do not want to do anything counter to God. I am curious, what was God's purpose for using these crystals? Thank you for your time.
I'm thinking of Ishmael.
Of what?
Ishmael.
Who's Ishmael?
A character in a video game. Your shoes can tell the tale.
Oh.
No need to speak, your shoes can tell the tale.
Well, anyway, here's my answer. Dear disciple, thank you for visiting our site and for submitting your question about crystals and frequencies. You are right that science has studied the use of audible, that is detectable by the human ear, frequencies and how they promote health, and has found a link. Interestingly, the greatest effects seem to take place when the patient's own voice provides the healing frequency. Maybe singing in the shower isn't such a kooky practice after all. One study suggested that tuning instruments to a lower frequency, set A to 432 cycles per second, rather than the standard 440 cycles per second, improved the effect of the sound. That's interesting when you consider that European orchestras in competition for audience have been tuning higher. Yeah, I don't remember what led to it, but I do recall some time ago reading up on tuning, musical tuning, and the standard, the frequency standard that was used for tuning. And A440 was what I was raised with them when I went to college. That was just understood to be the standard frequency, but that's not always been the case. And again, it may not always be the case. What I find interesting, before I go back to reading my answer, is that in competition, the European orchestras seem to believe that a slightly higher frequency will give their orchestra a brighter sound and will attract audiences more than somebody else who's using a slightly lower frequency. And so far, the changes have been pretty minuscule, but they're there. And if what this says is correct, then in fact, when it comes to the overall well-being of their audience, they're moving in the wrong direction. But then that's kind of what competition does. So I'm getting started on that. Going on to my answer. The idea that crystals can focus frequencies, however, has no scientific basis, and crystal healing is considered pseudoscience. Studies done on the practice have found no difference between using crystals and using placebos. In other words, the beneficial effects attributed to crystals can be explained because the patient expected their use to help. Or as someone once wrote, if you think your food will hurt you, it most certainly will. What you believe about something has a big influence on the impact it will have on you. Again, I got off my script here. You reference the use of gemstones in the foundations of the New Jerusalem and in the breastpiece of the high priest in the Hebrew worship system. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. You are to receive the offering from each man whose heart prompts him to give. These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and hides of sea cows, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and the breastpiece. The ephod was essentially a linen undergarment or undercoat. Then there was an overcoat, and then the breastpiece was worn over that. The ephod had stones on the shoulder pieces, and there are differing interpretations. We'll be getting to that in a little bit about what those were used for and how they worked, but at any rate. Oh, and we just read from Exodus 25, verses 1 through 7 in the New International Version. The value of these items, precious metals and stones, high-end textiles and spices, made them useful for worship purposes. It was the value that was the important issue, in other words. If God had imagined the stones to have healing value, he would have shown favoritism by restricting the use of said garments to the high priest. God, the New Testament asserts, does not play favorites. So too in the symbolic description of New Jerusalem. The gold, pearls, and precious stones demonstrate the increased value of the materials used in the city's construction. When you understand that the city represents God's ransomed people, the symbolism shows that when God has transformed us by the renewing of our minds, see Romans 12:2, our value increases greatly, and we shine with the glory of his perfect character. The warnings against the occult and sorcery protected God's people from getting separated from reality by belief in mysticism. The Creator made reality. So when we get separated from reality, we get separated by a belief in mystical explanations of the universe. We get separated from God. And since the Creator, or God, is the source of life, we run the danger of separating ourselves from life when we get caught up in mysticism. The idea of crystals having mystical powers can be found far back in human history. The Egyptians used precious stones as amulets and would bury lapis lazuli with their dead in the belief that the presence of the amulet would improve their experience in the afterlife. As the Israelites fled their bondage in Egypt, God used Egyptian symbols in their worship practices, but he also included safeguards to reduce the chance that the people would engage in the destructive practices of the Egyptians. For example, they erected their tent temple, the sanctuary, with the opening toward the east so that worshipers would enter facing west, away from the rising sun, thus avoiding the sun worship so common in the culture of the time. I encourage you to continue your search for truth and reality as you draw closer to your Creator. And may God bless in this endeavor. Sincerely, my name and title and all that other jolly good nonsense. Any thoughts about what we just read?
Yeah,
What?
I had a question about it.
What was your question?
I don't remember. Well, there were two things. One of them was kind of snarky. The other one, oh, okay. You were saying something made me think about the God instructed Moses, or did Moses instructed himself to build? Well, when the Israelites were bitten by all those snakes,
Yeah.
and Moses built a snake and told people, look at the snake, and they would be healed.
Yeah.
But isn't that, if you go in there and read the interpretation of the word, wasn't he actually told to build something other than what he really built? Wasn't he told to build a seraph or an angel or something?
Well,
Good.
yeah,
Snake
it depends on how you interpret it. And we did a
of health and healing is a snake on a pole.
well, yeah, we did a sermon presentation on that, and we looked at the Hebrew, and it depends on how you interpret the specific word used. But the word has relationship to an angelic being. Well, was not the quote serpent of Genesis a fallen angelic being who came to sow discord and tell lies about God? But then, so the what we do know is that I think that's in the book of Numbers, that the Hebrew uses one word when it has God tell Moses what to make, and a different word when it tells us what Moses made. And we know that centuries later, this bronze device, this bronze representation of a snake that Moses made, had become an object of worship and was a snare to the Hebrew people. Is that what you were referencing?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as we go through what we're about to cover in the book of Exodus, we'll be seeing that, well, I don't know how clear it'll be just from reading, but I took a class years and years ago which pointed out how closely the symbols used for worship in the Hebrew system matched the things that the Egyptians had, how the structures and the relationships and the pillars, all those things were drawn in part from the symbolism of Egyptians. And we can talk about why that is when we get there. At any rate, hopefully we won't get another power outage while we're getting this recorded. We're already.
My question was, it's kind of snarky, Autumn. I don't mean to be mean or rude or anything, but I didn't understand your answer.
Well,
Were you saying that wearing a crystal will improve your health?
No, I wasn't. I was saying the scientific evidence is that.
That I want you to buy me.
What did you say?
Because if you're saying that wearing a crystal or some kind of stone will improve your health, there's this really beautiful diamond ring that they're advertising that will cure all your ailments.
One of those.
I'd like to get up and walk again.
One of those snake oil ads, huh?
Yeah.
No, what I was saying was that the science has found that, it's just placebo effect. You think it'll help you, therefore it helps you.
Well, I think the ring would help me.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, I think it's a good time for us to go ahead get started in our formal Bible study, so let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings, and we thank you for making life possible for us. You provide the sunshine and the rain and the various things that make this planet work, and despite everything we've done to destroy it, still support life. We thank you for that. We thank you for your protection and your provision for what we need. We thank you also for the spiritual blessings, for those things that aid our mental health and our growth in character to become more like you. We believe that the written word does serve a has a limited effect in that direction, but it is there, and we do study it in order to be more closely connected with you. We know that it has, because of its limited nature, that it has value only as we have a connection with you through the Holy Spirit. So we ask that each individual who hears these words will also have a connection with you through the Spirit, so that they might receive the blessing you intend for them. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and read that answer was because the text I used is the very text we're going to start with. And probably the main reason I used that particular text was because I'd already opened this up and knew what we were going to read, and it stated what I thought was the purpose of having these stones as part of the high priest's garments. That is quite simply that they represented value. The wood for this structure was coated in gold. Some of the items of furniture were built of solid gold. Plus there was silver. The bases for holding up the poles were cast in silver. And then of course all the high-end textiles that were used, including the animal skins and so forth. All of these things represented value, and I'm suggesting that the use of precious stones in describing the New Jerusalem are intended to illustrate to us our value to God, because we are the living stones built up into God's temple and his holy city. So, Exodus 25 out of the New Living Translation, which is what we traditionally use in this Bible study, not because we think it's better, but just because it kind of takes us outside of what we're used to and makes us think. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to bring me their sacred offerings. Accept the contributions from all whose hearts are moved to offer them." And you'll notice that this version is going out of its way to make the language gender inclusive, whereas the older version of the NIV, I think what I've got is the 1984 version, did not do so. The NIV has been updated to be more gender inclusive, and I'm going to point out a place at some point in the future where I think they went overboard in gender inclusion and made something gender inclusive that was specifically intended to be gender specific. But anyway. So, here is a list of sacred offerings you may accept from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen and goat hair for cloth, tanned ram skins and fine goat skin leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the lamps, spices for the anointing oil and the fragrant incense, onyx stones and other gemstones to be set in the ephod and the priest's chest piece. have the people of Israel build me a holy sanctuary so I can live among them. You must build this tabernacle and its furnishings exactly according to the pattern I will show you. Now, we talked about this a little bit when we read the book of Hebrews over a year ago, I'm sure by now. And we noted that the pattern, well, a pattern is a pattern. It's something that you use to construct something. A blueprint isn't a building. A blueprint tells you what dimensions to use, what things to put where to make the building come together right. I recall an incident in Colorado. They decided that they wanted a new church building at the institution where I was going to school. And the president of the institution had seen a church, a Mormon church, in Provo, Utah, and he liked the design. And he took pictures of it, and he brought the pictures back, and he gave the pictures to somebody there at the school that had some training and skill in architectural design, and had that person draw up blueprints for the church building. And the guy made a mistake. It's an understandable mistake. Given the tools they had at the time, it was something that was probably pretty easy to miss. But he drew the plans for the basement. He put all the places in the basement where the high windows would be put, so there would be some light, some natural light entering the basement. A typical design feature to have high windows in the basement, so that you'd have that, and then of course you would have the building above it and the windows and doors. What this person forgot to check was where the doors were relative to the basement windows. So in several places he had the doors opening up over a basement window, and they found that out after they had already put together the framing for the walls and set them up, and they look, well, now we need to put a porch here to get up to this door, but there's a window in the basement right underneath of it, so the porch would cover up the window. So what they ended up doing was building a very complicated concrete form to make a gap underneath that porch so that you could go up and over the window, but the window was still open to some extent, even though the porch itself was over the window, so that restricted how much light would come in through the window. Like I say, given the tools they had at the time, that was an understandable mistake. And it did require a lot of extra work and effort to put those porches in after we found out that, I mean, they'd already laid the block, the windows were already in place. Now we're putting up the upper story walls and doors right over the window. Whoops. So, but that's what a blueprint does. A blueprint says those things. It's not a building itself. And so the pattern here is essentially a blueprint. Now, did Moses see a structure in heaven that mirrored the structure he was supposed to build? I'm not going to say yes or no to that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the language, exactly according to the pattern, does not prove that he saw a building in heaven. It just demonstrates that God gave him a plan to use in constructing this tabernacle or this sanctuary, this worship center. So, and I was thinking as we did this, as we get farther on, we're going to have a lot of dimensions given to us and so forth. And what do I want to say here? Well, I might at some point attempt to draw the layout as we read about it. Problem is that I thought, well, maybe it would make sense to use three-dimensional software to do that. It would be interesting. The problem being that I don't have much experience in three-dimensional software. And let me show you what I did today, just trying to get started with it. That is supposed to be a start at the Ark of the Covenant. So I have the chest there as a solid rectangle, or a rectangular prism, I should say. And I have rings there and there. I don't know how clearly you can see that in the video, that are supposed to represent the rings for the carrying poles. And then I used what they call a capsule and lengthened it way out to make it a pole. But I haven't figured out exactly how to move these objects around relative to each other in the 3D space. And in fact, this is a free program that Microsoft offers. It might be extremely limited in what it can and can't do. So, so I can go up here. I can grab this carrying pole. I can move it around. But as you can see, if I move it in there about even, well, then it goes inside the chest. If I get it outside the chest, where it can go through the rings there, then it's off whack on. I don't know how to move that, but anyway, that was something I piddled with. So we've read through verse 9, and what God has told Moses is collect offerings, and then use these offerings to build a sanctuary, a portable worship structure, building, where the people can come to draw close to me. And he says the purpose of this is so that I can live among them. The point of this tabernacle is relationship. God wants to be connected to his people. And he's going to give Moses instructions for how to build this. And he tells him, you need to follow this design that I give you. Verse 10, have the people make an ark.
I see a lot in there.
What'd you say?
I see a lot in there. Where is God's temple? Isn't it in our hearts and in our minds? And to have a perfect temple for God, then we need to have a perfected character. So what did God send in order to show us what perfection is? He sent us his son, that we can use him as a pattern as to show us how to live. I'm not sure I made that clear.
Well, I think what you're saying is that we need to be faithful to the pattern that we have been given as we construct our soul temples. Is that what you were wanting to say?
Yeah, we need to look to Jesus as our pattern.
Yes, exactly. Have the people make an ark of acacia wood, a sacred chest, 45 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 27 inches high. This is clearly...
But I have a problem with what we just said.
What'd you say?
I have a problem with what we just said.
What's that?
That we need to make Jesus our pattern. We need to not have that be our focus. Our perfected character should not be our focus.
That's the work of the Holy Spirit. We simply open ourselves to that work by trusting God. And then we leave the results with Him.
Our job is to keep the communication line open and to
Exactly.
keep the friendship flowing and ever growing.
Which is why I pointed out that the purpose of this sanctuary was for relationship, so that God could live among His people.
And when you get to know, when you keep that relationship, that connection open, the relationship growing, then you grow to admire your Creator and the law of, I guess, cause and effect or something.
The law of worship, essentially. You become like that which you adore.
Yeah, you emulate the people, the person that you revere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can I tell a silly little story?
All right.
When I was in second grade, I shouldn't tell this. This is TMI. When I was in second grade, I had a friend that I loved her so much. She was my best friend. And as an adult, when I took my son to meet her mother, I went to visit her mother and took my son with me. Her mother told my kid that she had raised me because I was at her house so much. Anyway, in second grade, I went up the steps on the slide behind my friend. And when I looked up, I could see my friend's panties. And she had a hole in her panties. And I saw a little bit of a crack. And so the next day, do you know what I did when I got dressed?
What?
I went digging through my underwear drawer to find a pair of underwear that had a hole in them.
Oops.
I knew I'd get in trouble if my mom found out, so I was real careful around my mom.
Yeah.
But not careful enough.
She found out.
Let's just end it like that, all right?
All right.
I
Well,
have CPTSD, okay?
yeah. I was pointing out that this version, as we have it, is intended for an American audience. They don't use inches in the rest of the world. That's an American thing. And in fact, if you look at the footnotes for this section here, it says 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, 1.5 cubits high. And a cubit is officially the distance from your elbow to the tip of your fingers. And on most people, that's about 18 inches. So we imagine that then to be half a yard, 1.5 feet. Or if you were to give it in metric, it would be close to, each cubit would be close to half a meter. Probably wouldn't be very exact. I remember where I worked for 24 years, we used to produce meter wide panels, but we did it on equipment that was set up for American units of measurement. So to produce a meter wide panel to the nearest 32nd of an inch, we would set our equipment to 39 3/8 inches, 39.375. That's not exact, but it's close enough so that to the nearest 32nd, that's a meter wide. And we would sell our product to countries that use the metric system. And they would like those meter wide panels because it would fit well within all their designs that were done in the metric system. But for us, it was 39
I'm
3/8.
moving that per bit.
So that's a little bit more than 2 cubits, 1 meter. But we're close. We're in the vicinity. That's a way to think of it. So that's why they say 27 inches. 18 inches plus 9 inches, or for the 1.5, and then the 45 inches for the 2.5. 2 times 18 is 36, plus 9 is 45. That's where they came up with that. And we don't know exactly what standard they used for the cubit. We believe that if they were going to have multiple people working on this, that they wouldn't use an actual human cubit for everything, because everybody's would be just a little bit different. That they must have had some sort of a standard to work with, and that standard has been lost to history, so we don't know a whole lot about it. So that's the dimensions of the thing. A sacred chest, 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5. Overlay it inside and outside with pure gold. So this was a wooden chest, but then the wood was overlaid with gold. And run a molding of gold all around it, essentially a gold band to hold everything together. Cast 4 gold rings and attach them to its 4 feet. 2 rings on each side. Now that's interesting, and you see where I put those rings in my rough and quick and dirty, should we say, drawing. I put them up on the side. Let's just read on here, and then I'll talk about it. Make poles, that's verse 13, make poles from acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings at the sides of the ark to carry it. These carrying poles must stay inside the rings. Never remove them. When the ark is finished, place inside it the stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant which I will give you. The covenant, footnote for that is place inside the ark the testimony, similar in chapter 25, verse 21. Hello. You there?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Well, things happen. The Hebrew word for testimony refers to the terms of the Lord's covenant with Israel as written on stone tablets, and also to the covenant itself. All right, now that's their interpretation. That's possible, yeah. So, when the ark is finished, place inside it the stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant which I will give you. Let me read that out of the NIV. I didn't get it open to the right place today. Then put in the ark the testimony which I will give you. So, and then if we read that, just for the fun of it, let's read that out of the King James Version, so we'll see.
Will you come open my bedroom door?
Will I open it?
There's a cat wanting in.
Is there? In or out?
In. Yeah.
Let me read this out of the King James here.
Oh, she's wanting out?
Might be. Verse 16. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee.
Thank you.
Yeah. cats have an odd relationship with doors.
You don't want a cat shut up behind a door without a litter box.
Well, no, but also, you know, a cat will stand at a door and beg to go out, and then when you open the door, they want to stand there and look out the door and make up their minds over a long period of time whether or not they're going to go through.
Well, just remember, she's on guard
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
And with the door shut, she can see me, but she can't see you, so
Yeah,
she's going to be nervous.
yeah. So the reason I was reading out of the more literal translation is it doesn't specifically say tablets of stone. It says the testimony, but it says which I will give to you, which hasn't quite happened yet. Then make the ark's cover, the place of atonement, from pure gold. This is sometimes called the mercy seat. It must be 45 inches long, 27 inches wide. In other words, the dimensions of the top of this chest. Then make 2 cherubim from hammered gold and place them on the 2 ends of the atonement cover. Mold the cherubim on each end of the atonement cover, making it all of 1 piece of gold. The cherubim will face each other and look down on the atonement cover. With their wings spread above it, they will protect it. Place inside the ark the stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant which I will give to you. So now it does say the stone tablets. And we talked about that last week, that those stone tablets may have been taken from the pavement that they saw below the God of Israel when Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel saw God and ate a festival. Then put the atonement cover on top of the ark. I will meet with you there and talk to you from above the atonement cover between the gold cherubim that hover over the ark of the covenant. From there I will give you my commands for the people of Israel. And they've got a footnote there for Ark of the Covenant, Ark of the Testimony. Yeah, in fact, the NIV just says Ark of the Testimony. Literally, what's the King James Version say? Yeah, the King James Version is the one that uses the term mercy seat instead of atonement cover. Wait a minute. Did I go backwards there? I'm trying to look this up in the King James Version and I'm not finding what I was expecting to find. Oh yeah, I reread. Okay, that's what happened. I reread verse 21. So yeah, it's this version which says the stone tablets, when in fact the other versions, the more literal versions, just say the testimony that I shall give thee. All right, so yeah, so I got confused when I reread that and thought it was put in place later. And then he says, I will meet with you there. My presence will be between those gold cherubim that you make as part of this mercy seat or atonement cover that will be solid gold on top of this Ark of the Covenant or Ark of the Testimony. And by the way, in the King James Version, the name they give to the wood sounds unpleasant to us because there's a particular four-letter word for bodily function that sounds very like it. In fact, the first four letters are all the same. So that's why I think one of the reasons why the more modern versions use acacia wood rather than using the term that got used in the King James there. If you want to look it up, you can see what it is. So, then verse 23, then make a table of acacia wood, 36 inches long, in other words, 2 cubits, 18 inches wide, 1 cubit, and 27 inches high, 1.5 cubits. And I'm sure the footnote is just, giving us those references. Overlay it inside and outside with pure gold and run a molding of gold all around it, similar to what they did with the ark. Cast 4 gold rings and attach them to its 4 feet, 2 rings on each side. Make poles from acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings. I keep getting on the wrong section here. All right. We're reading about the table. 36, 18, 27. Okay. Overlay it with pure gold and run a gold molding around the edge. Decorate it with a 3-inch border all around and run a gold molding along the border. So was this like a rim to keep everything on the table, to give it a place to stop and not slide off? This 3-inch border? I don't know. Make 4 gold rings for the table and attach them at the 4 corners next to the 4 legs. Attach the rings near the border to hold the poles that are used to carry the table. Make these poles from acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Make special containers of pure gold for the table, bowls, ladles, pitchers, and jars, to be used in pouring out liquid offerings. Place the bread of the presence on the table to remain before me at all times. In the King James, that would be the showbread. But I think they've determined that should be translated. Let me look at this in the NIV. Okay, it doesn't have any specific reference for that, so they just use the term bread of the presence. The King James uses the term showbread. Just for the fun of it, let's see what the New American Standard Bible says there. It uses the bread of the presence on the table before me at all times. Okay, so we now have 2 articles of furniture described for us. Nothing about where they're to be put yet, just these. So we have the ark, we have the table, and now, verse 31, we get into the lampstand. Make a lampstand of pure hammered gold. Make the entire lampstand and its decorations of one piece. The base, center stem, lamp cups, buds, and petals. Make it with 6 branches going out from the center stem, 3 on each side. Each of the 6 branches will have 3 lamp cups shaped like almond blossoms, complete with buds and petals. craft the center stem of the lampstand with 4 lamp cups shaped like almond blossoms, complete with buds and petals. Now, I'm going to read that in another version just because I saw something there that I have a vague recollection of having been aware of before, but I want to see how it reads in the NIV, which is where I would usually read this. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. 1 bud shall be under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a second bud under the second pair, a third bud under the third pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall all be of one piece with the lampstand hammered out of pure gold. Now, if that's the case, then you have 6 times 3, which is 18, plus 4, which is 22. You have essentially 22 places to be lit. Now, we speak of a 7-branched candlestick, and the menorah that the Jews use is of such a design where you have a center stem going up through the middle, one lamp there, and then the 3 branches, each wider than the one before it, so that you end up with 7 lamps. But usually they show it with 1 lamp on each one, and according to this, there were 3 lamps on each stick. Now, were they on the end of the stick, or were they as you went up? I've seen it drawn that they were as you went up, and then there were 4 on the center because there was 1 at each joint where the branches came together, and then 1 at the top, apparently. The description is a written, literate description and not a pictorial description, so we don't get to see what was being described. That can be particularly problematic when we get into the book of Ezekiel and read Ezekiel's description of what he's measuring. Well, he gives us lots of measurements, but exactly how are you supposed to draw it? Well, he didn't provide us with a drawing, so some people have tried to imagine it and put in what they think was being described, but all we have is the word, the verbiage.
How do you draw perfection?
What?
How do you draw perfection?
Well, how do you describe it in words? I mean, both are impossible.
We can't because we don't understand it.
Right.
I think it was Manoah asked, "Tell me your name," and the response was, "Why do you ask my name? You would not understand it."
Mm-hmm.
Name meaning character.
Right.
And when the being went up in a puff of smoke and a flame, Manoah recognized who he had been speaking to. So again, we don't have the ability to represent something that we don't understand.
Yeah. Now, we talk about the cups, but the cups are apparently not the lamps. Because we read on here, verse 36, the almond buds and branches must all be of one piece with the center stem, and they must be hammered from pure gold. Then make the 7 lamps for the lampstand and set them so they reflect their light forward. The lamp snuffers and trays must also be made of pure gold. You will need 75 pounds of pure gold for the lampstand and its accessories. Now, someone once told me about this 75 pounds, and that's an estimate, footnote G there. 1 talent or 34 kilograms. That's what they believe the conversion should be. That 75 pounds of gold isn't a whole lot of gold. That in fact, it would be a block of gold about this size. That would be 75 pounds. I think it might be a little bigger than that, but I have worked with lead, and I know that it doesn't take a lot of volume of lead. And gold is in atomic weight close to, not real close to, but close to lead. So it would have similar weight per volume, or density as we call it. And so it wouldn't take a lot of it to equal that 75 pounds. But this person was actually making a point about how much working you would have to do to take that small amount of gold and make it into a gold lampstand, a solid gold lampstand. I don't know if maybe somebody who's more familiar with Judaism would know if the Jews use solid gold menorahs, and if they know the weight of such a thing. Be interesting to know that. And then the chapter concludes with God telling Moses to be sure that you make everything according to the pattern I have shown you here on the mountain. Moving on to the next chapter. Plans for the tabernacle. Make the tabernacle from 10 curtains of finely woven linen. Now, for most of us, textiles are kind of a foreign thing, not in how we use them, but in how they're made. We know that a lot of our fabrics now are made from blends of natural fibers like cotton, and then of synthetic fibers of rayon or nylon or dacron or all those other different kinds of things. So there's a lot of synthetic fibers in a lot of the fabrics that we use. But that we generate these fibers, and we turn them into thread, and then we put the thread into a loom, and we weave the thread into a fabric. I've got an ad up there popped up, and I can't figure out how to bring it down out of the way without completely. Maybe I'll just completely close it. See that? If it was just showing up at the bottom, it wouldn't be so bothered. But it's up there where you can see it in front of the text. But I recently, a year or two ago, saw a video where somebody demonstrated all the steps it took to turn the flax plant into linen. It is not a simple process. It involves a lot of washing and drying and working and so forth. So this finely woven linen, well, that just means that they would have made a high thread count, essentially, is how we'd put it today. Linen. So this was, as I suggested, a high-end textile. So they were to make the tabernacle from 10 curtains of finely woven linen, decorate the curtains with blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and with skillfully embroidered cherubim. These 10 curtains must all be exactly the same size, 42 feet long and 6 feet wide. Join 5 of these curtains together to make one long curtain, then join the other 5 into a second long curtain. Put loops of blue yarn along the edge of the last curtain in each set. The 50 loops along the edge of one curtain are to match the 50 loops along the edge of the other curtain. Then make 50 gold clasps and fasten the long curtains together with the clasps. In this way, the tabernacle will be made of one continuous piece. So, we're talking 10 curtains, 6 feet wide, that if you put them one along each other, it means you'd end up with a piece of fabric that was 42 feet long and roughly, 50 to 60 feet wide. There's probably some overlapping to be done, plus the overlapping will be done when those were done. Join 5 of the curtains together to make one long curtain, then join the other 5 into a second long curtain. So you got 5, so you're making something that's, still, when you get the 5 together, that's 5 times 6 is 30, you got 30 and 30, you can get 60 or roughly, whatever, when you overlap them. Then make 50 gold clasps and fasten the long curtains together with clasps. In this way, the tabernacle will be made of one continuous piece. Now let's go down and look at their conversions. 28 cubits long and 4 cubits wide is how that's given. Now, when we get later, we will see that the tabernacle was supposed to be 10 cubits high and 10 cubits wide. So if you put the cloth just straight over it, you would have 30 cubits. So the 28 cubits leaves you a cubit short on each edge of completely covering things. Now, interesting. So, and then they were long enough because, if we're talking 4 cubits, 4 times 5 is 20, 20 and 20 makes 40. Well, the length of the elements of the thing was that the holy place was 10 cubits by 20 cubits, and the most holy place was 10 cubits by 10 cubits. So the total length of the thing was 30 cubits. So if you have essentially 40 cubits of cloth to cover it, then you have excess on each end over the 30 cubits of the length of the building that you're going to cover with this curtain. Now, where were we when we read that? Okay. All right, so you had first the curtains. The curtains were made from linen, and they were decorated with the colored threads, and they were to be embroidered to represent cherubim or angels in this fabric. And these 10 curtains would all be exactly the same size, all joined together, and the 2 sets would be linked with blue yarn loops on each edge. So there'd be 50 loops on each edge, and then those 50 loops were held together with 50 gold clasps. Now, then they were to make 11 curtains of goat hair cloth to serve as a tent covering for the tabernacle. So in other words, the linen would be on the inside, and now we're going to cover that over on the outside with goat hair cloth. And that would be 11 curtains, so it would be longer than the covering, the linen coverings for the inner part. So we have the 11 curtains of goat hair cloth. These 11 curtains must all be exactly the same size, 45 feet long, 6 feet wide, just like the others. Join 5 of these 6 curtains together to make one long curtain, and join the other 6 into a second long curtain. Allow 3 feet of material from the second set of curtains to hang over the front of the sacred tent. Make 50 loops for one edge of each large curtain. Then make 50 bronze clasps and fasten the loops of the long curtains with the clasps. In this way, the tent covering will be made of one continuous piece. The remaining 3 feet of this tent covering will be left to hang over the back of the tabernacle. Allow 18 inches of remaining material to hang down over each side, so the tabernacle is completely covered. Complete the tent covering with a protective layer of tanned ram skins and a layer of fine goat skin leather. So again, we've got a description here, and each person would probably define the description a little bit differently in terms of actually making a drawing of it. For the framework of the tabernacle, construct frames of acacia wood. Each frame must be 15 feet high and 27 inches wide, or in other words, 10 cubits high and cubit and a half wide, with 2 pegs under each frame. Make all the frames identical. Make 20 of these frames to support the curtains on the south side of the tabernacle. Also make 40 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame with the pegs fitting securely into the bases. So I just imagine like a board, although it may have been a structure, perhaps cross-braced structure instead of a board. But at the bottom, it would have pegs sticking out, and those pegs would fit into the silver bases that would hold this framework up, and then the framework would be used to support the curtains. Let me scroll this down, because we're reading verses 15, 16, 17, and so on. Each frame must be 15 feet high, 27 inches wide, with 2 pegs under each frame. Make all the frames identical. Make 20 of these frames to support the curtains on the south side of the tabernacle. So if you have 20 cubit and a half frames, that's 30 cubits. Also make 40 silver base. Where were we here? I keep starting to read in the wrong place, and we end up duplicating here. Also make 40 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame, with the pegs fitting securely into the bases. For the north side of the tabernacle, make another 20 frames with their 40 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame. Make 6 frames for the rear, the west side of the tabernacle, along with 2 additional frames to reinforce the rear corners of the tabernacle. Now, if these frames were a cubit and a half, you have 6 frames, so that's 6 times 1.5. 6 times 3 is 18 to be 9. Essentially 9 cubits out of those 6 frames, which is a little under the 10 that we usually give for the width. So then a little gap, but then they're frames, and there's cloth to cover it, so the cloth would cover any gaps that might be there. Along with 2 additional frames to reinforce the rear corners of the tabernacle. So, yeah, it was a little bit short. And so these additional frames would be corner frames of some sort to link those together and to close that in. All right. These corner frames will be matched at the bottom and firmly attached at the top with a single ring forming a single corner unit. Make both of these corner units the same way, so there will be 8 frames at the rear of the tabernacle set in 16 silver bases, 2 bases under each frame. So there'd be the 6 frames for the width of the thing, and then 2 frames on either end, and even the corner frames would have 2 silver bases and 2 pegs to fit in those silver bases. So there'd be a total of 16 silver bases at the back of this tabernacle building. Make crossbars of acacia wood to link the frames, 5 crossbars for the north side of the tabernacle and 5 for the south side. Also make 5 crossbars for the rear of the tabernacle, which will face west. The middle crossbar, attached halfway up the frames, will run all the way from one end of the tabernacle to the other. Overlay the frames with gold and make gold rings to hold the crossbars. Overlay the crossbars with gold as well. And after I had gone away to school, my dad worked with the students at the elementary school, church school associated with a church in Provo, Utah, and he helped them build a model of this. And he was using, I forget what he used for wood. He may have used tongue depressors as these frames and cut them off and scaled them. And then he would put little, tiny little eyelet rings in there and screw them into that wood. And then he had tiny little pieces of dowel wood to make the poles that would hold these frames together, 5 on each side, as I recall. And then he spray painted it gold. So that's how he represented the crossbars. I'm just recalling that from a very long time ago. I borrowed it once when I did a sermon that involved the sanctuary down in Moab, Utah, where I was going to school. And that was quite an operation, because he built it on plywood. He actually cut the plywood in half. So he had a 4x8 sheet of plywood, cut it in half, and put hinges between the two halves so the thing could fold up. And so after you unfolded that, then he had holes drilled in it for the doweling for the outside curtains, and the all that would be put together, and so that was quite involved. I'm imagining I had to do a lot of that work myself. It's been a while, I don't remember all of it. Anyway. So we just read about the frames and the crossbars, and we got verse 29. So verse 30. Set up this tabernacle according to the pattern you were shown on the mountain. For the inside of the tabernacle, make a special curtain of finely woven linen. Decorate it with blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and with skillfully embroidered cherubim. Hang this curtain on gold hooks attached to 4 posts of acacia wood. Overlay the posts with gold and set them in 4 silver bases. Hang the inner curtain from clasps and put the Ark of the Covenant in the room behind it. The Ark of the Testimony is probably what that footnote's going to tell us. Yes. This curtain will separate the holy place from the most holy place. Then put the ark's cover, the place of atonement, on top of the Ark of the Covenant inside the most holy place. That's that solid gold piece made out of hammered gold with the cherubim covering it. Place the table outside the inner curtain on the north side of the tabernacle, and place the lampstand across the room on the south side. Make another curtain for the entrance to the sacred tent. Make it out of finely woven linen and embroider it with exquisite designs using blue, purple, and scarlet thread. Craft 5 posts from acacia wood, overlay them with gold, and hang the curtain from them with gold hooks. Cast 5 bronze bases for the posts. So there were 4 posts for the inside curtain and 5 for the outside curtain. Now, there's something that I want to note about this. I heard this from somebody, and while I've kind of come to regard some of what he says with, shall we say, a bit of skepticism, there may be some value to this observation. There was a curtain to separate the holy place from the most holy place. And while it isn't said here, we know that in future we'll see that the most holy place was a place that the people were not allowed to enter. And in fact, most priests were not allowed to enter that place. Only the high priest, only once a year, entered that room. And what was behind that? Well, the Ark of the Covenant. And that Ark of the Covenant included that mercy seat or table of the presence, and that was where God's presence dwelt. So now you have a curtain between most of the priests and between the people and this representation of God. And what is embroidered into that curtain? Well, pictures of cherubim. And the question then becomes, was there a cherubim who has ever since that time, and was even at that time, seeking to prevent people from seeing God as he truly is? Was there a cherubim who lied about the character of God and tried to put God in a bad light? Was there someone who didn't want the human race to know who God really was? Because if we did, we would trust him and be converted and transformed into God's image. And he didn't want that. So then this curtain, and I think we talked about this when we read the stories of Christ's death in the New Testament. This curtain, with the angels embroidered into it, may have represented this cherubim who sought to hide from us who God was. And when Jesus died, that veil, that curtain, that blockade between us and the character of God was torn in two from top to bottom. No longer would this cherubim be allowed to lie. I shouldn't say he'd no longer be allowed to lie, because he's lying to this very day. That's what he does. It's his nature. But Jesus said when he lies, he speaks his native language. But there was the opportunity for people to see past his lies and view the true character of Creator God, Yahweh, if you wish, as demonstrated in the life of Jesus Christ, and even more particularly in his atoning death for us, that now we don't have to believe the deceiver's lies, this cherubim's lies, and we don't have to have God hidden from us by this curtain.
And to keep from being deceived, it might be a good idea to pattern your own private Bible study along the lines of the motto of this group. Recognize that language changes over time.
Mm-hmm.
Words today don't have the same meaning that they did during the time that the Bible was written.
Yeah.
And when something is said that shows God to be less than loving, then recognize that you're probably looking at it through the lens of our culture,
Yeah.
our language, because something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it may be that there's an error somewhere in the translation itself. Because remember, the people who translated the Bible were also deceived.
Yeah. Well.
Also, for those of you who are parents and have had a child go astray, and you wonder what you did to cause that, you blame it on yourself, recognize that there is, in fact, a perfect parent. And that perfect parent had a multitude of children go astray.
That's right. Well, it looks like our time is about up, a little bit short, but we've managed to get through 2 chapters, and I don't think there's enough time left to make it sensible to start another chapter. And this can be a little bit dry and tedious because we're trying to imagine a physical structure based on a verbal description. And that's kind of hard to do. That's why if I was really adept with 3D, I'd try to draw these things in 3D and put it up where we look at it and imagine what it might have looked like.
Go build it in Minecraft.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I could try to build something like it and paint it in gold using house flipper.
Somebody out there, go build it in Minecraft and
Yeah. Well, there will be more descriptions of this as we go through the next. Let me just look ahead. We read 25 and 26. So we read some of the furniture. We read about the tabernacle. As we go on, is that just one page? I guess so. We'll read about the courtyard, the oil for the lampstand, the priestly garments, the ephod, the breastpiece, consecration of the priests. That's in chapter 29. 30 talks about the altar of incense, atonement money, basin for washing, anointing oil, incense. We'll read about Bezalel and Aholiab, the Sabbath, the golden calf is in chapter 32. And 33, there's more about it. And then 33 and 34 are going to be most interesting, especially when we relate them back to chapter 24, which we read last week. So there's a lot in here. Like I say, right now we're in a kind of a dry section, but hopefully we'll find something uplifting in it as we go through it. So, as we said before, we do have a sermon presentation ready to present, and we're going to try to make that available on the Facebook group at about 11 o'clock Central Time tomorrow, August 17th. And of course, then, whether you are interested in that or not, we'll be back covering the book of Exodus next week, same place, same time, roughly. And so until then, we say to you, goodbye and God bless.